Hello fellow Illumineers, Bennet here, this time with another deck profile, and today I will show you my favorite deck, Lemon Lime Discard. That helped me win an online tournament with 70 players last weekend, the Home Masters Cup by playing ducks for the German community, and I happened to win this cup 2 times in a row. I'm back-to-back champion now. I won the 4th edition starting with set 7 with Lemon Lime Discard, and again I won this one with Lemon Lime Discard as well, and thought it would be a great occasion to show off my favorite deck. I will go through the exact 60 that I brought to the tournament, and will comment on what the card does in my deck, what are the specific use cases for the card, and also if the card is part of the core or just a tech card for this specific tournament or this specific meta in general. So let's start ahead. I will go card by card, and yeah, of course, starting with the mini Diablo, like I love to call him. Yeah, his main purpose obviously is to be shifted on with our 3-drop Diablo, the Floodborn one, to from early start of the game gain card advantage and make sure to draw enough cards to always be able to do the things we want to do, because Lemon Lime Discard definitely needs a full hand to be able to yeah, do the things that is built to do. So obviously having that card in your opening hand is always worth keeping, even without the 3-drop, because you want to draw into the 3-drop, and best case scenario you get the Diablo out. Even better, you get the Diablo out for multiple turns and therefore draw a lot of cards. Also, what is also possible with this card and what helps you in a game is that you see the complete hand of your opponent. So from the start of the game you get a glimpse into what your opponent is capable of doing in the following turns, and can kind of plan your own turns around it. For example, if you see multiple songs in their hand, you can easily plan on playing an Ursula Deceiver into a Bare Necessities, for example, because you know what's in there, or you see a very head start from your opponent and you can therefore react and try to set up an early under the sea, for example. Most of the time I play him on 1 because he also fits into specific sync together under the sea lines, where for example Ariel with Singer 5, this one with Singer 1 basically, and a 2-drop help you get to 8, so sometimes that's nice too, and he's also great on board just laying around until you get the Diablo to directly shift onto him. There are just a few games where I ink him even though I could play him turn 1. For example, if I start and I see my hand is not that great, and I can't risk to give away an ink that I would need for my next turns. Yeah, continuing with the one and only Ursula Deceiver, not only good in this specific deck, also good in a lot of other green decks, but in our deck we love to see the card with such a potential. This card helps us obviously getting rid of a card in our opponent's hand, because the main goal of our deck is to buy turn 4, 5 or 6 if we are more like the aggressor and don't have to react to their stuff so much. We can focus on emptying their hand first, and ripping a song off of them is really helpful to by turn 4 or 5 with a You Have Forgotten Me combined with a Sudden Chill, actually make them have 0 cards in hand, because that's the main goal. We want to bring them into the top deck mode to have them have suboptimal turns. She's also great with 1-3. She doesn't really die to anything except like a Strength of a Raging Fire. And you do want to have a 2-drop on board, mostly because for your Prince John, you have a Singer 2 on board to maybe fire off a Sudden Chill or a Bare Necessity in the same turn you play the Prince John. But it's also great to have a minion on board that sticks that you can use for Under the Sea Sync together. A bit smaller use case, I don't do that often. You could also bounce your own Ursula with your Muses to redo the effect and get rid of another card. Also same scenario for the Diablo 1. You do get to see your opponent's hand, and those information are really important for the following turns. Okay, Oh, by the way, I forgot to add that, of course, both of these cards are a part of the core and are necessary for you to play this deck. We will continue with another Ursula. I now play 8 Ursulas. That's actually the spot that used to be Sir His most of the time. Most of the time I have been playing Lemon Lime actually. But this specific card got into the deck because mainly of Ember Steel aggro. Because Ember Steel aggro now is so fast that we need to react way faster than we had to do. And Ursula as a Singer 4 gives us the opportunity to curve into an Ariel and then have a Singer 9 on board and can under the sea on turn 4 already. What she also does great is not dying against anything steel. I mean, there is a specific scenario where your opponent just spams the board and is able to do a Strength of a Raging Fire, but normally this Ursula is most of the time protected by everything else. Also really nice to add is that with her 1 and 4 stat line, she's a really nice target to combine with Cri-Kee when you, for example, need to clear because your opponent played a Pete, you can't play UTS, and then you have to play the Cri-Kee to kill opponent's board, and most of the time she actually survives that specific attack. Yeah, you could opt to do just 3, but I wanted to have the consistency in doing something with the Under the Sea. She also pairs nicely with the Muses, which is a ward target, and her with her 4 willpower. Most of the time these two will survive and can also sing Under the Sea together. Yeah. Following up with one of the most important cards. To be honest, it used to be more important in the early days, where the Diablo hate was not as strong. For example, Peter Pan Shadowfinder, who came into the meta, I think, because of I'm not quite sure which tournament it was. I think it was the Nordlaw tournament in Germany, where Bratwurst played his infamous evasive red-purple list and included Peter Pan and showed the potential of him combined with other great cards like Iago, of course Maui Shark, but of course a 2/3 that is able to clear our Diablo directly because it has Rush. And not dying is really dangerous for our Diablo game, because what we don't want to do is shift our Diablo, because that means we lose 3 cards. We lose the 1-drop Diablo, we use the card we drop, and we lose the card Diablo itself. So we invest 3 cards and get 1 safe draw, so we go out -2. So in general, you want to at least get to 0, so you kind of cycled your own Diablo in a way. And losing the Diablo instantly after playing it and losing 2 cards is obviously bad for our card advantage plan, which we want to use. Diablo, if it goes off, it's oftentimes a game winner, because we don't really rely on searching our deck more for answers. We already get a lot of answers into our hand. And what's also very important is to ink every turn until we get to like 5 or 6 ink, and ensure we can play everything we want to play. Because our deck has a lot of like soft uninkables, which means cards we really want to use later. For example, a Muses in a game where we see our opponent is gaining a lot of momentum. We want to make sure to have the Muses on board. Also Ariel, for example, to help us sing Under the Sea, to help us find Under the Sea. And therefore we are really happy to get more cards into our hand and don't need to ink our best cards with a smaller hand. Let me think what's also cool about him, if we have a 1-drop Diablo on board and we need we miss a bit of singing power to get the Under the Sea off, we can surprise our opponent with shifting Diablo, and because our Diablo has already dried, we can instantly use the +2 cost basically to sing Under the Sea and maybe catch our opponent off guard. Yeah, it also helps in a game where you where you haven't been able to get a lot of cards early in hand, but you still manage to get your opponent down. Your opponent has no hand cards, has a very limited board, is dependent on his top decks, on their top deck. And we can slam Diablo, and in the mid or late game, we can still use him to regain that card advantage and to actually finish off our opponent because we have more resources than them. Yeah. Also nice to have an evasive card that is able to, for example, attack into a location safely against a deck that's not too dangerous for him. And of course, there are cards like Strength of a Raging Fire, like spells or songs that would technically kill him, also the Brawl, but we have specific cards in our deck that help us make him survive. For example, Ursula Deceiver gets rid of a song, or Bare Necessities gets rid of something else that is dangerous to Diablo. So we do want to get him off, but we also need to be a bit careful to not lose him directly, because that would throw us behind rather than get us in front. I will continue with, I think, my favorite card in this deck. It's Ariel, Spectacular Singer, and she does sing spectacularly, or has been singing a lot of songs through my career of playing that deck. She's obviously our greatest tool to realize an Under the Sea without having to play too many characters. She already brings 5 sing power to the song, and therefore just needs us to play another 3. Very prominent is the Prince John, because he has Ward. He is not, even though he has just 1/2 stat line, he's not been, the opponents most of the time is not able to kill that specific card, and we already have 8 on board and can sing an Under the Sea. Same for the Muses with their Ward, and also mentioned for Ursula Vanessa, really great as well. Of course, what she also does really, really well is, giving us the opportunity to look deeper into our deck and to actually find cards. She basically says, you have access to the next 4 cards in your deck. It's, of course, you don't draw all of them, but because you have the opportunity to choose which card you want from the 4 cards, she kind of draws us 4 cards and discards then 3 again, and we are able to keep the song. She searches for a song, and that's the reason I used to play 20 songs most of the time. There's a bit of mathematics behind it, to like a percentage how often your Ariel hits, and 20 songs has a real good percentage. Also 19 songs as well. I think 19 songs you could do as well. I have been opting to play 19 songs in the last set 7, but this time around I wanted to make sure to be able to sing a lot of Under the Seas. You will see that I have more than 3 in my deck. And also using the Muses as our main resource combined with the Ariel. I will also do a VOD review of 2 streamed games I did in the tournament. And in both these games, I constantly bounced off my Ariel to gain value from the same card. That's really important, because I have 1 Ariel, I play her, get a song, and when I then bounce my Ariel back to my hand, it's not a resource from my deck, from my hand basically. It's kind of a free resource, which you just, the cost you have to do for this specific resource is paying the ink and a bit of losing tempo, because you played for 3 something that has no direct impact right now. But using the same Ariel over and over again actually gives us a +1 every time she comes down. Because if we just play her, get a song, that's just a 1-for-1. We don't lose a card, really nice. Kind of like a cantrip, like the Diablo 1-drop from Amethyst. But if we use the same Ariel over and over again, we actually get a +1 every time we play her, and just lose a bit of tempo while doing so. She also really, really nicely sings Bruno. We don't talk about Bruno, which is very important to have a plan B if you can't really Under the Sea. Or you see something, you have something on the opponent's board that's just too strong to get Under the Sea, even with a Kida debuff, for example. So we can do a kind of a tempo swing. It's really nice to do so on, I will get to it when I go to, we don't talk about Bruno, but in general, of course, if they play something they can't really use directly, and have to replay it, they lose a lot of tempo. And we always like to slow down our opponent because we ourselves need a lot of time to set up our engine, to actually be able to do the things we want to do, to have our swing turns, for example. Yeah, I think I could talk way more about this amazing card, but I will opt to go to the next one. It is Gaston Bariton Volley. Actually, a card I have put into my deck like last minute. I had one spot left and wasn't really sure what to put into it, and just thought to myself that since my main game plan for this deck is to sing Under the Sea consistently in a meta where I feel like we have to do an early swing turn onto the board to win some games. So that's basically our fifth Ariel. It fits into the line where we play Ursula Vanessa on 2 and we play a singer 5 on 3 and therefore are able to sing already on turn 4. You can test him, he's definitely not part of the core. I again forgot to mention if the other cards are part of the core. Of course, Diablo is part of the core and Ariel is part of the core as well. This singing dude is not specifically part of the core. He's just a tech card because I can use him in this scenario. I also like the 3/3 stat line, to be honest. There is another singer 5, I think it's called Gazelle 2/3 and 2 lore instead, but I like to get the attack in, so we have a 3/3 for worst cases. For example, he kills Kaloon or other good cards in the meta. I think there's not really much more to say about the Gaston. Most of the time it's Ink. You always prefer the Ariel over him, of course, but sometimes he's really nice to set up something you want to play in the next turns. Okay, on to another core card in our deck. There is no way we play less than 4 Prince Johns, greediest of them all. Yeah, I think without Prince John, the game plan of discarding our opponent would not really work. Because what this card is actually, for example, Sudden says your opponent discards 1 card. So we pay 1 card to make our opponent discard 1 card as well. So at the end, we both lose a card. For You Have Forgotten Me, that's a bit different because we just lose 1 card with playing You Have Forgotten Me and the opponent loses 2 cards. So that would be a card advantage +1, which is nice, but we don't get a card into our hand. So it doesn't really matter, the card advantage. It gets really interesting and way better if we have a Prince John on board, because then suddenly already the Sudden Chill gives us a +1 card. We lose the Sudden Chill, our opponent loses the card he discarded, and we get back 1 card. So it's a +1, and our deck definitely wants to work with card advantage, wants to have way more cards into our hand, and wants to lower the cards in our opponent's hand, and we freely get something back. We get rewarded for doing so. And okay, nice transition, rewarded. The keyword ward on him is really, really important. There are just a very, very few cards in the meta right now that are actually able to clear the Prince John, because obviously you play him on 3 or 4 and don't want to put him sideways ever, because you don't want to risk losing him. Like even sometimes where you think, okay, he has to have that specific card to clear him if he's sideways, you don't want to risk it, even if it's just a 5% chance that your opponent has it, because the upside of having a Prince John on board is just so big, and the lore in the early game is never really important. But to be fair, in the late game, once you gain control of their hand and of the board, the 2 lore get important as well. It's one of the few cards that actually has 2 lore in our deck and helps us close out the games earlier. Also, of course, if your opponent has no hand, you can then, even you lose him, sometimes say, okay, our opponent has 1 attack and I will turn everything sideways anyway, so I'm just giving him the free Prince John trade to gain more lore because we don't need to use the effect. It's also amazing we don't talk about Bruno, because you pay a card to get rid of a card from your opponent, actually on the board and in the hand simultaneously. No, it's from the board into the hand and then it's gone, and we get a card back. Also, what I haven't said is that they exponentially stack. So if you have a slower matchup, for example against red-blue or against red-purple, who both have struggles removing the John early game, for example if you have 2 in hand and you have Forgotten Me, sometimes in slower matchups you can use or you can risk lose the tempo of playing 2 in a row on turn 3 and on turn 4, because having 2 on the board gives you double the draw you get from this card. And this can get crazy real fast. I remember a game in Ravensburg where they had the tournament where I had 3 Prince Johns on board. Like I risked the tempo of 3 turns. And then I played 1 You Have Forgotten Me and 2 Sudden Chills. So I made my opponent discard 4 cards and actually drew 12 cards back. And that's of course a high roll scenario, not often happens, not that often, but 2 on the board sometimes happens, and you already will feel the strength of having that extra draw as well. Thinking about if I can say something else about him, some funny use cases where you need to be a bit more have attention on. One is, for example, a Holy World, where your opponent actually discards themselves. So we do get a trigger from John, and also Doc if they discard a card, or Diablo if they shift Diablo and have to discard a card because of that. We can make use of the Prince John trigger and draw a card. A bit of niche situation, but yeah, I think there will be a lot more applications to this card, but I think I covered the most important ones. Of course, also part of the core build of the deck. We will continue with another very important card. I think this set is she's more important than ever. It's the Muses. Her effect, probably you know it, but her effect, you can, when you play a song, get a trigger and can choose a character on board with 2 or less attack to bounce back to their owner's hand. So most of the time you use her as a tool to remove or like control the board, because you make your opponent lose tempo every time you give something back to their hand. I think a very prominent example is Genie, where they have a 2/4 that quests for 2 and gives them a card, which is good, obviously. And initially you would think, okay, I don't want to give him another card, but playing a 4 cost that just gives you a card instead of like having influence directly onto the board or in the game really hurts the opponent tempo-wise. If they have to pay 8 ink for just draw 2, I mean, they get a +1 card advantage because it's the same card, but playing 8 ink for a +1 in hand is not really good. And that helps us a lot of the time. She is very safe to play on 4. Most of the time, I mean, there are scenarios where you instantly use a song when you play her, so that's cool to have her to the potential to use instantly, so you can generate tempo if you play her. A lot of cards don't have this privilege. But that's just, I think, in the scenarios where you fall behind on board very quickly. For example, against Ember Steel aggro, and that's a plan B line where you say, okay, I'm so far behind, I need to remove something right now, or I will lose the game in 2 turns. And therefore, you can use your Singer 2 with a Sudden Chill, for example. You can use your Ariel with a We Don't Talk About Bruno, get the trigger, and actually remove something from the hand as well. Also, a really important card, or like the most important card in the late game, when you are able to rip your opponent off their hand and off their board, they have nothing left, but for example got to 17, 18, 19 lore, because as I said, we are very slow in the early game and use our swing turns to then are back in the game and try to control it from there. And she, of course, is very good for that scenario where you just stop your opponent from gaining lore ever. Like in the tournament, I real talk won 6 games where my opponent went to 19 lore, and the Muses alone helped me not getting them to 20. It was crazy. I needed a bit of luck, of course, but the potential of this card is just amazing. She's also great, as I said, as a UTS singer. And what I also, of course, like about her is the flexibility to give back our own cards to our hand. Of course, another great utilization of this card is that you can bounce your own cards back to hand. I think the best card to do so with is Ariel, because her enter the battlefield effect is just so good that you want to do it multiple times out of the same card. For example, what I really like, if we needed a plan B under the sea, for example, and our opponent is left with, for example, a Madamum Snake, a 3/3, which didn't die because our Under the Sea wasn't able to get it under the deck, it was not able to reduce the attack of this card, she can give the Ariel back that we had to turn sideways to sing with the Muses together, and we keep a possibility to regain resources because of the Ariel. We don't lose her. That is really, really good. Thinking about another, I mean, there are a few cards in our deck. For example, sometimes I like to quest with our Prince John, and we need to play a song anyways. We don't have a lot of cards in hand we can utilize, so we can get 2 lore from this and then give back our own Prince John back to hand and replay him to kind of ready him again and make him not attackable by our opponent. Same goes to the Muses themselves. Sometimes you are forced to turn Muses sideways and you don't want her to die, for example, against a fox, because she's so important in the state you are in, and therefore you can bounce your own Muses back. That's really nice, and replay her to not lose her. Like, really, really important card. And also a card you are not very mad to drop tempo on, because if you play her on 4 and have another copy, for example, on 5, you of course lose a lot of tempo, but because you have 2 Muses on board, you have the opportunity to have a big tempo swings again and regain that tempo from the loss of it earlier. Yeah. Just adding to that having 2 Muses on board just makes the effect double that strong. I also, if I have 2 Muses on board, most of the time I can give back 1 card from my opponent, and I can also give back my own Ariel too, so I get rid of one thing from their side and am able to regain the card I want to play. I think there are probably a lot more use cases. By the way, this is the signature of my girlfriend. I was really happy. I forced her to sign my card before a big tournament, and since then been using that card with a lot of pride and happiness. I will, she's of course core as well. Continue with Chip. Yeah, he's not really core. I have had feedback from other players saying they don't really use him right now. I don't think he's like very, very necessary. I just like having that extra discard that is not being stopped from a Pete. Like, it's a character discard, and you can use it even though your opponent has Peated, and therefore is the only card in our deck that is then able to discard, and sometimes this can actually be clutch. I also like the 3 attack from him. I used to play Daisy Duck, Musketeer, Spy a lot of times before. As I said, I liked that extra discard. But with him having 3 attack, I can also use him on the battlefield, basically. I can kill a Kaloon with him, or other cards that have 3. I think 3 is a really nice threshold to get to, because a lot of good cards that also quest for a lot have 3 behind their as a willpower. It's nice. You can use it, for example, because it's just a single discard. Most of the time, this single discard doesn't really get you to 0 cards from your opponent, but you can either say it's a nice on-curve play after Prince John, like again gaining +1 in card advantage, and also reducing their hand a bit more to then maybe on turn 5 or 6 do the final blow and get rid of the whole hand from them. Yeah, I think nothing really more to say. He also sings Under the Sea together with the Muses, Ariel, or with Ursula, but you can definitely do another card than him. You can actually do the Daisy instead, if you prefer having a card that is also bounceable by Muses, even though I don't really do that a lot of times, but it's possible, and sometimes it can come in clutch. Okay, let's continue with You Have Forgotten Me. I think one of the cards that make this specific color combination is so powerful, because there are other discard decks, of course, but a discard deck that is able to discard 2 with just one card without any conditions is crazy to me and really, really helpful. Just a small flex. I think it was in Lille DLC Lille last year, the first DLC, I got to meet Alice Pizzoni and was lucky enough to get a signature onto this card. I think actually back then I wasn't really maining the Lemon Lime deck, it was in set 3, but I used to play yellow-green in set 2 and therefore was really in love with this card specifically. And I'm really happy that I chose this card because we were just able to get in 2 cards, I think. So yeah, it has been following me the whole time playing the deck. I think it's really self-explanatory what this card does and why this card is so important in our deck. As I said, our main goal is to get rid of their hand. Like, it's either getting rid of their board first and then get rid of their hand, or what you prefer to do is first get rid of their hand so they can't really use stuff after you get rid of the board, and then you can just get rid of the board. He curves perfectly into our Prince John 3 and 4. If we are on the draw, I don't really have the exact numbers, but most of the time, because our opponent starts with 1 card less in their hand, and we, for example, get a lucky Ursula Deceiver early, there's a good chance most of the decks were not able to refill their hand fast enough and automatically, without choice, getting discarded 2 means they lose their whole hand. You can also, in the same turn, combine it with singing Sudden Chill, really nice, so you discard 3 cards actually, and that's more likely that your opponent is on 3 cards left. Sometimes even your opponent realizes he has to do something against it and is forced to play their whole hand. For example, just having 1 card when you are able to cast You Have Forgotten Me. Yeah, that's a nice side effect because everyone knows this card is in the deck and tries to play around. I think when I ask my opponent how many cards in hand and the answer is 2, there's an 85% chance I just slam You Have Forgotten Me onto the board. It's also really important for your card advantage. Especially in combination with Prince John, or like mainly in combination with Prince John. I remember games where I had like 3 cards in hand, not really usable, 1 Prince John on board, and I kept on drawing cards that didn't give me anything, just 1 draw per turn. But finally getting the You Have Forgotten Me kind of got the snowball rolling because I get 2 cards back, maybe even another discard into my hand, drawing even more. And this card is just fantastic for this use case. Sometimes you will experience, especially against specific decks, that in the mid to late game your opponent is not having cards anyway in their hand, and sometimes it feels a bit useless to draw into it. But I think the upside of having it when you need it is way bigger than being sad about when you can't use it and have it in your hand. There are cases in which you can argue to go onto 3, but I think that is really important for the deck and your main tool to get rid of slow decks, because they like to build up their engine. For example, they're ramping or they are drawing a lot of cards, and this card helps you to combat that and be efficient against it. Yeah. Let's continue with Kida. First time I think in months I have played 3 Kidas. The main reason for that is that I have basically another Kida in my deck. I will get to later. As you have already seen, I split the songs and the characters to kind of part them, and therefore we have not seen the other Kida I have been talking about right now. I have experienced, like last meta, every Kida I saw was like, okay, nice, I now have the opportunity to do, I mean, of course, the main reason is to reduce your opponent's characters to 2 or less attack, so you can have a sweep under the sea and get rid of everything at once and don't risk losing the cards you have turned sideways to sing the Under the Sea together. And Kida with their -3 obviously is amazing for that. So everything with 5 or more strength, which is like 80 to 85% of the cards in the meta right now, maybe even more, just vanishes. What I've experienced this time around for this set is that doing this on turn 5 a lot of times is too slow. a lot of times I wished for a reduction to cast Under the Sea on turn 4 already. And therefore, we opted for Lost in the Woods as a song. I will get to that later, but just as a heads up, that's the reason why I only play 3 Kidas in my deck. She has another use case, which is really interesting, which sometimes comes in clutch. Because, for example, if your opponent has 3 to 4 minions on board, you as well, but you know that if they quest through and you can't really deal with their cards, they will get to the finish line earlier, and at the same time, you are not allowed to quest because your characters are very, very weak and get picked off easily. But if you combine turning sideways with a Kida, like you turn 2 Prince Johns sideways, 1 Ariel, 1 Muse, for example, you get a +6. And then you play Kida to reduce your opponent's minions, or characters, so they are not able to finish your board. And in the turn thereafter, you have not only the 6 you have been protecting, like that's a total of 12. You also have the extra 2 from Kida, so that's a total of 14. And sometimes this final blow is enough to get to your opponent. Like, you can ignore their board completely if you know they can't finish next turn, and you have a 2-turn story. I think story is the new word, like 2-turn game, you can also say. Yeah, thinking about something, she sings Bruno, which is nice. And what I experienced, like going to 3 in a meta where we actually don't really want to use 4, felt like an upgrade, because besides the Under the Sea use case and her being like a good minion, she doesn't really bring more to the board, and sometimes it feels bad to drop her. Sometimes you have to play her, for example, you don't really want to play her, and therefore just having 3 actually felt good this time around. Okay, and we continue with the luckiest cricket in Lorcana. It's Cri-Kee. I have been going on to 2. I can directly say, if you don't feel too safe, because this meta is faster, and also uses a lot of Peats. So sometimes your opponent is saying, okay, I will protect my board with a Peat, so you can't do Under the Sea, and next turn I directly win. So this feels like a game over situation. Cri-Kee actually battles this and counters this, because Cri-Kee allows us to use every card on our board as a threat. Normally our deck is, the signature of our deck is that all of our cards are rather weak, like mostly in terms of attack, and therefore they most of the time have higher willpower, but the low attack makes it impossible to actually use our cards to battle the opponent's cards. Cri-Kee makes it possible, with just using 5. Your, like Ursula Vanessa, for example, turns into a 4/4 and can easily clear a Smee without dying, which is amazing. Our Ariel with 3 willpower can kill everything that just has 2 attack. For example, we have the Muses with 2/4 stat line that also profits very well. Of course, what's also really good about Cri-Kee, I don't think that's really necessary right now in the meta, like last meta with MacDuck's Mana, with library, stuff like this. It was way more important, but locations are still part of the meta right now, and therefore you like to see you like to have an option to destroy a location, because obviously just having 2 minions on board is already a +6 attack, and should kill every location in the game with just 2 minions. And since we don't have any other way of directly removing a location, or don't have like strong cards in our deck, we do like to see the Cri-Kee. I can actually see upping the count of Cri-Kee 1 more to 3. You need to be a bit careful, because there will be games in which you don't want to use Cri-Kee. Like most of the time, Under the Sea is just way better, because you don't need to attack. You get rid of everything. You get rid of cards that are ready and not exerted. For Cri-Kee, their cards have to be exerted, but also nice to have a 3/4 with 3 law. Helps a bit in the sense of closing a game when you ripped your opponents of their resources with the 3 law. Yeah, I think that's all I can say about him. He also sings Bruno. You do like to have a Bruno singer on board, so you don't have to pay the full 5 ink and still gain the tempo of Bruno with cards like Prince John on board or another Muse. I think that's the last character card. It's Tramp. It should be the first set 8 card, if I'm not mistaken, in our deck. No, it's set 7, my bad. Set 7 card. I am the biggest fan of the song Strike a Good Match, which lets you draw 2 cards and then you have to discard 1 card. So this basically allows you to cycle, like go through your deck to find options. Tramp does this way better because most of the time you want to play Tramp when he costs 4 or 3, like when you have 3 or 4 characters on board, and therefore you draw 3 to 4 cards and hopefully try to find an Under the Sea or a reduction for Under the Sea, because sometimes you have one part of it and you are missing the second part, and going 3 songs deeper or like 3 to 4 cards deeper into your deck most of the time helps you finding that missing piece, and you are able to, with the 3 or 4 characters on board, simultaneously sing Lost in the Woods or Painting the Roses Red to reduce their attack, and you can also sing Under the Sea with the rest on the board. He also helps in a steal matchup because having a 2/6 for a 2 law is really nice. He doesn't really get removed instantly, like he even survives a Zeus, and that's something you like to see. I have not tried it yet, but I can see that, for example, you can swap a Gaston Bariton Volley for a second Tramp. I would not necessarily call it core, like it's a card you want to play in your deck when you are fearing to not get the answer and you need that search. But he's so good that I think in every build, like no matter if you go more into the discard direction or more into the clear direction, in every build makes a lot of sense. 1-off minimum. Of course, you don't want to play too much of it. Because beside the searching effect, he's not like progressing you in your game, and therefore it's a 1 or 2-off, which makes sense. He also is a good Under the Sea singer, doesn't really come up too often because cards like Ariel, Muses, or Vanessa Ursula just need a second card anyway. Like he's not able to sing it on his own, and most of the time you sing with 2 singers anyway, so it doesn't really change a lot. But for example, he sings Bruno as well, which is really nice. And yeah, just helps you get a bit better hand for the lookout. Yesterday in a show match I played, I didn't use the effect. Like the 2 or 1 card in my hand were already good enough, and he was just a good body in a scenario where I needed it on the board. And now we get to the last section of this deck profile. It's actually the songs, the core of the deck, and that's why I personally love this deck so much, because songs let you be way more dynamic, way more faster, because for the cost you paid already for a character, which of course also has more applications than singing a song. For example, Ariel has an enter the battlefield effect, so she already gave you something you wanted, or like Ursula Deceiver. But then with this card on the board, you don't have to pay for the song, and therefore you are able to gain a lot of tempo because of it, because you don't need to pay extra, like playing stuff for free kind of. I mean, it's not really free because you are using a character action you could do otherwise. You could quest or do something else, attack. So that's one cost, and the other cost is the card itself. But if the card itself does something you want to do, of course, that's not really a cost. You want to play that card. Yeah, and that makes the deck really dynamic. Of course, also with Ariel, who can search songs, or with the Muses, who works perfectly with songs as well, because the trigger goes off when you play a song. You want to have a lot of songs in deck. I talked already about the ratios. I think minimum is 19. You could like try 18, but I guarantee you that you will whiff a lot of times with Ariel. And this also means that you have 1 or 2 less songs for your Muses. So this just means on average you will get the Muses effect less often. And for my specific deck, I want to use the Muses effect as often as I can, and therefore I opted for the 20. Maybe you can risk doing 21. There will be a threshold where it's just too much songs, and you don't, for example, have enough characters to sing, or you just draw songs that don't really have an impact, so you want to balance it out really nice. And I think 20 songs is really good. Okay, Let's just start with the obvious song. It's Sudden Chill. Also a card, actually fitting here, Sudden Chill, and You've Forgotten Me as a pin, which I got in Ravensburg from Bennet Lorcana. Really nice person. Thank you again for it. I really appreciate. And these two, which are like the main discard source of our deck, are in the game since set 1. It's really funny, where Prince John was not even available. Yeah. Really easy. Sudden Chill, discard a card from your opponent. I already said that this means it's a card advantage 0. But if you have Prince John on board, it's what you want to do. It's a +1. And you can also sometimes, even without a Prince John, because you have a You Have Forgotten Me plus discard, which is discard 3, you can get your opponent to 0 cards in hand, which is the main goal, as I already mentioned. Yeah, I think nothing really much more to say about this card. She just does the things you want her to do, wanted to do, and it's really self-explanatory. But of course, core, and of course you want to play 4 every time, because that's a really, really nice card. Now let's continue with Bare Necessities. I have for most of the time with Lemon Lime played actual 4 Bare Necessities, but I think this time around, this meta specifically doesn't really have a lot of non-character cards that you always want to get rid of. You have the typical stuff like be prepared in the right moment. You of course want to use this card as a Diablo protection too, but overall, like in a meta where we had more manas with a blue steel being around, we wanted to have a possibility to get rid of stuff like this, or like a Lucky Dime item version or something. But this time around it's not that much. And most of the decks don't really rely so much on the non-character cards. And therefore, you never want to play this card and not see anything you can discard. Maximum in a scenario where you are very far ahead, have a lot of hand cards, and use this card to take a look into the hand, for example. But most of the time, you definitely want to hit. You don't want to play it without hitting. And yeah, if you, for example, have seen their hand with Diablo 1 or Ursula Deceiver, you most of the time also know if you hit or not. You have to be a bit like, have to have attention what they are inking and what they are playing, so you can try to remember stuff and think of, like, sometimes you 100% know you will hit something, even though this card doesn't really guarantee it in the first place. But because you saw their hand, it does, and therefore can use it. Really, really nice. Yeah, it also discards 1 card, which you can use with Prince John, which you can use to reduce their cards to less cards in their hand. And I think most of the things about this card is already said. I think if you're not sure if your opponent has a non-character card or not, you do prefer the Sudden Chill to get the safe discard. But there are use cases in which you're really happy to have this specific discard as well. Let's continue with Painting the Roses Red. I personally love this card because even though there are games where you can't really use this card, you oftentimes have the ability or the time to sing this card to draw another card. There are also like battle trick scenario where you, for example, have a Diablo Floodborn yourself and your opponent has a Diablo also on the board. And because of Painting the Roses Red, you are able, because of the -1, to trade off their Diablo and your Diablo survives. That's something that comes to mind. And sometimes in niche scenarios where you are like, okay, my opponent thinks the card X is going to survive if my Ariel is taking the card I want to attack with, for example, Ariel Spectacular Singer, with it, so I can turn it sideways. I can surprise my opponent and reduce it by 1 to make my card survive the trade. But, of course, the main use case for this card is to combine it together with Under the Sea. Most of the decks, not most of the decks, but a lot of decks that are aggro, like for example Ember Steel aggro, has a lot of cards that are under 2 or under when it comes to attack, but they also play a lot of 3 attack minions. And just with 1 Painting the Roses Red, you guarantee a full sweep if they have a board full of 2 attack or less and 2 characters with 3 attack. For example, a Smee and a Kaloon. Because what you don't want is to sing under the sea and have your opponent actually survive cards on the battlefield, because he can then use those cards to get rid of your singers and throw you back very, very far. Most of the time you don't want to lose a card, because we already lose a lot of tempo setting those cards up, so we want to use the cards as long as possible. Yeah, I think that's most of the things I can say about this card. What's also nice, the Muses benefit from it as well, because you can reduce something on the battlefield, actually get the card back, and can use the Muses effect to give the card back to hand for the late game scenarios where your opponent is trying to get the last lore in. You can argue, especially with the next card coming up, to just play 2 cards, but to be honest, directly comparing it bare necessities, I would rather play 3/3 than 4 bare necessities and 2 painting the roses red, because it's still a cantrip card after all, and guarantees a cycle minimum. Like in hands, we don't have good cards. We like to draw a card as well. Yeah, and now for a specific tech card, and I think that was one of the cards that made me win the tournament, is Lost in the Woods. Lost in the Woods, if you don't know, reduces the opposing character's attack by 2 until the start of your next turn, which is really interesting, because painting the roses red, for example, just reduces in the turn itself, and Lost in the Woods does it differently. What it does open up now, because I said normally I want to use Kida with Under the Sea and Clean Sweep, but in this meta, because it's a bit more faster, I can use Lost in the Woods on turn 4 and already have a Singer 8 on board with, for example, Ursula Vanessa and Ariel Spectacular Singer, and hardcast Lost in the Woods. And most of the time, and I think the main reason I tested this card is Rhino, the hamster, the Floodborn hamster, which comes in early, and our deck has really hard difficulties removing that card, because with his resist 2, we definitely can't ever attack without a Cri-Kee, which comes down on turn 5, but because he has 4 and gets reduced by 2, he lands on 2 attack and therefore is either under the seeable or museable as well, which is really, really nice. What's also cool, if you, for example, combine it with the Muses for a last string, because you want to bounce back cards from them, you most of the time guarantee that your singers or cards that are sideways survive, because you have a lot of high willpower in your deck, and the -2 attack for the cards from your opponent most of the time makes it impossible for them to trade your own cards, which is really, really nice. Also, Ursula Vanessa has a nice synergy with it, because as just a 2-cost card, she can already sing Lost in the Woods. And yeah, I experienced this card as kind of a mother knows best in some cases as well, where this gets rid of almost everything, like 4 or less. And with the Muses on board, this is just oh, you played a Tamator, take the Tamator back to hand, like the 6-drop Tamator. Okay, then we continue with, I think, the card before the last card. So you see that I have been talking a lot today or in this video, but we are almost done with this one. Obviously showing off the only enchanted I have in my deck. I bought this for myself to have the lucky moments. I can recommend having a minimum of 1 enchanted in your deck, so you have the chance of having a real nice moment when you draw it or when you actually play it. Be careful if you do so. You tend to keep that card more often in hand instead of inking, but I think I'm already over this point where this occurs to me. Yeah, what can I say about We Don't Talk About Bruno? This card is our main single removal in our deck, and actually is not tied to any attack restrictions or anything else. We can give back every card on the battlefield, except of course the cards with ward. But this card especially shines in our deck because, as I said, our main goal is to get rid of their hand completely, so they don't have cards in their hand. This means that if we play Bruno onto a card, we guarantee that this specific card is not going into the hand, but is going into the discard, because he has to discard it at random and have just 1 card in hand. Very important, after we under the sea the board also, our opponent plays a bigger card. Really a nice answer also against the Maui half shot, of course. They lose a lot of tempo. Sometimes it's even worth to just say, okay, you get the card back to hand. Most of the time you don't discard this card right now. You could play it again next turn, but that loses a lot of tempo already, and therefore is worth as a tempo play. We have a lot of singers in our cards in our deck that sing the song, and singing the song is really important because paying 5 for to just extend the game, for example, to just to as a plan B, we rather want to have an Ariel, sing Bruno with it, for example, bounce back the Ariel with our Muses, and then replay the Ariel instead of having to pay the 5 cost for the Bruno. Sometimes it's still enough, but that's worth mentioning. Too. Also synergizes with Prince John, which is really nice. And yeah, I think that's most of the things we can say about Bruno. In my opinion, having 4 Brunos is core. There have been metas where people were like going on to 3, but I personally love to be on 4. And what I also love to be on 4 on as our last card, also one of my favorite cards, of course, because this card has won me a lot of games already. It is Under the Sea. For the longest time, I have been playing only 3 Under the Seas because, of course, an 8 uninkable, which is very tied to a specific situation, even if this situation occurs rarely more often, and is very good if you get it. It's not there every time, so it's a risk, of course, to have 4 Under the Seas in your deck. Like, you can easily draw 2 or 3 Under the Seas in the same turn, like in the same early game, where you don't really use it. Yesterday I played against red-blue, and I drew 3 Under the Seas, and that really put me back into my game plan and made my options way worse. Like, this danger is always there, but in my opinion, this meta right now is very board-centric and also relatively fast. And having this swing turn, if done correctly, or if we sweep the whole board, this is always or almost always such a swing and win percentages. Like, our opponent has 5 cards and can easily win next turn with turning sideways, but with taking away everything there, we gain back a lot of win percentages because they suddenly can't quest for even one. And yeah, as I mentioned in all the cards before, we always have to keep an eye out for when can I Under the Sea, because sometimes, for example, playing Ursula Vanessa on 2, even though you know you will hit a song, and not playing Ursula Deceiver helps, because you can set up an Under the Sea. That is really important to keep an eye out for that. What is nice here, even though it's uninkable, so you can technically not use it as ink or resource, Diablo Floodborn, who needs to get rid of a song in our hand, actually makes use of the card without being played. And also the Tramp, who lets us discard cards from our hand to draw cards, does help with it as well. Also for the Strike a Good Match, the song that lets you draw 2 cards, discard 1, is also good if you want to maximize your Under the Seas. And I think this is it for the video. I'm really amazed that I got through without cutting. Thank you so much for watching my video. I hope you have liked it. I do have a Metafy in case you want to do a session with me one-on-one, you want to learn the deck, you already know how to play it, but you want to be perfect or like be better at it, you have specific matchups questions, or you want to test a specific matchup, you can visit my Metafy or give me a message on Discord as well, or Instagram or Twitter. I will link everything down in the comments, and you can get in contact with me, and I would be glad to help you out in case you need it. Also, if you have specific questions for the deck, please let me know in the comments as well. Also, if you liked the video, please leave a like, that would help me a lot, or subscribe to the channel if you haven't. It was a great pleasure, and I will also upload VOD reviews from the semi-final and final game in the next couple of days, so you can actually see me play the deck and I can comment on what I did and why. Have a good one, thank you so much, and see you next time around. Bye bye!